Baruch Hashem, you're a bad Jew.
Shalom.
Welcome back to another episode of Bad Jew, the place where there is no such thing as a bad Jew. I am so excited that you chose this podcast. There are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of Jewish learning podcasts out there. You chose this one today. We have an incredibly fun subject for you. I cannot wait for you to hear this episode. But before we actually introduce the subject, Ann Toback is with me today from circle.org. Ann, how are you doing today?
I am doing great. Thank you, Chaz.
Love to hear it. Love to hear it. Before we introduce what Circle is, before we talk about what the subject of the episode is, you know more than anybody that there is the Bad Jew Challenge, telling your life story in 4 minutes. Are you ready?
Challenge accepted.
I love it. Love the energy. Echad, shtayim, shalosh, yalla.
Okay, so Shalom Aleichem. I'm Ann Toback. I am a lifelong activist. I was born into a family with over a century of union activism. I was born in Flatbush, Brooklyn, and I moved to Seacliff, Long Island when I was 4. The first action I remember taking part in was protesting for the release of Soviet Jewry. It was in 1975 on First Avenue by the UN, and I was literally on my father's shoulders. And I can still remember in my mind anyway, I remember being surrounded by hundreds of thousands of people. And I remember the power and the community and the solidarity and the strength of being part of that group. In elementary school, I fought for the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment, and I advocated. I was an ardent feminist then, still am. In junior high, I joined SANE, which was the National Committee for a Sane Nuclear Power Policy. And one of the biggest arguments I had with my family, with my parents, was I wanted them to sign a slip so I could I could be part of a civil disobedience action in front of the Shoreham nuclear power plant. SANE and I were planning on going there and chaining ourselves and getting arrested, demanding that there be more accountability and safety for the community. My dad said, I will go with you, we can protest, but you may not get chained to the fence. I will not take a chance that my 14-year-old will spend the night in jail. I thought this was incredibly mean-spirited, but we did protest. 25 years later, I participated in a civil disobedience action with brothers and sisters in the fast food worker industry. We were fighting for a $15 minimum wage in New York. I was arrested and I spent 5 hours in jail downtown New York. I did not spend the night in jail, and we did achieve a $15 minimum wage. I became a labor lawyer, and then I ultimately became the assistant executive director of the Writers Guild of America East. And I led the Writers Guild strike on the ground in New York from 2007 until 2008. And I was really proud to do it. And I actually revisited the Writers Guild picket lines just a few weeks ago on behalf of the Workers' Circle. In 2008, I changed careers because as much as I love and continue to love union solidarity, I wanted to do impactful activism, teach people to make commitments to be impactful, lifelong activists through a Jewish lens. I came to the Workers' Circle because their values and their heritage resonated with me. They were founded by Eastern European labor activists, and they were deeply committed to Yiddishkeit traditions of resistance, resilience, and culture. The Workers' Circle was founded by union activists who came to the United States fleeing autocracy, and they wanted the protections of a democracy in the United States by and for the people. Today, I lead the Workers' Circle, and we're fighting for that same democracy immersed in our Yiddishkeit heritage. I've had the privilege to connect directly to our Yiddish roots through many trips to Eastern Europe, where we take groups and connect with 1,000 years of life. And together at the Workers' Circle, we work for a Shenera and Bessera Welt for Allah, a better world for all. And all of that is inspired by 1,000 years of Yiddish life that came before us. So that's me bringing us up to today.
Awesome. Well done with only
Did I do it?
You did it with only a few seconds on the clock. You used your time very economically. You were very, very well spoken, and I love your story. I think you have that rebel spirit, but also, I mean, really, beyond just being a rebel, that's a very basic way of saying you're an activist, and that's really inspiring. And the work that you're doing is really incredible for the United States. So kudos to you, Kol HaKavod. This episode on Bad Jew, only one other time on this show have we ever done a Yiddish word of the day. And for those who watch on YouTube, there's always a little pop-up that says the Hebrew word of the day at a different point, because I like to teach little bits of Hebrew along the way. It's fun.
Sure.
It's a fun, cute way to get people engaged with the language of what Judaism is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I remember also growing up, I would have friends that would come up to me and they would say, "Oh, so you're Jewish? Does that mean you speak Jewish?" Right? And I would say, "No, I don't even speak Hebrew." And then I later on realized the right response was, "No, speaking Jewish is not a thing." But it actually is, because that's what Yiddish literally translates to. The word for Yiddish means Jewish. So we hear Yiddish words used in modern day more in a comical sense. We hear it used when our friends, might call each other a schmuck, when, your mother needs you to go grab a schmata from the cupboard to go clean off the tabletop surface, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different words in Yiddish, but we don't really hear it in modern day society anymore. So, Anne, as an organization that's very familiar with Yiddish, I have to ask you, does Yiddish even matter?
Does Yiddish matter? What a great question. So should I just say yes? And we're done, right?
Tune in next week for a new episode.
It matters. It matters very much.
But why? Why does it matter? We're only using it for small little expressions here and there.
So if with your permission, I would expand Yiddish from just a language, which does matter, to a culture, a people. It's the language of a people, a proud people, millions and millions of people who lived in Eastern Europe and whose traditions and legacy continues to impact us every day, every Jew, every day, from the United States through Israel and beyond. So it's so much of who we are. To be Jewish in the United States, and you could argue maybe even not to be Jewish in the United States, Yiddish impacts you, from our food to our language to our literature and our activists and our traditions.
Okay, fascinating.
Yeah.
I think you've kind of made a bold claim here. I'm going to respect it. You said it's a people.
Yes, it's part of the people. Yes, it's
part of the Jewish people.
Yes.
Okay. And what part does that play exactly?
So, Yiddish has been around for 1,000 years. Let's start there. And it was the majority language spoken by the Jews of Eastern Europe. And there were millions of Jews in Eastern Europe prior to 1939, prior to the Holocaust. So if you go back to, let's say, 1938 in Eastern Europe, so you're talking about Poland, Russia, Lithuania, and I have to condition myself and say all of these borders were constantly changing. I often talk about the Kingdom of Poland, which existed in the 17 and 1800s and before, which incorporated so many of the places we now think of as Eastern Europe, or the Pale of Jewish settlement. Millions, the language of the Jewish people in those days was Yiddish. In 1938, 11 million people spoke Yiddish in the world. Of course, the majority in Eastern Europe. Today, it's between 500,000 to 1 million. But if we go back to the 18th, 19th, 20th centuries, that language connected people across borders, and was a major part of the identity. Just like English is a part of our identity, but more than that, it was the language that we lived, that the Eastern European Jews lived.
Fascinating. So, in the Renaissance era, there was something called the Silk Road, where many languages and cultures merged for the first time,
Right.
starting to trade, right?
Mhm.
Is that kind of what the purpose that Yiddish served, in the sense that it allowed different communities to speak to each other for the first time?
Sure, yes. And we were a people at times on the move, be it refugees, there's persecution, there's also just regular movement to find economic, the economics of supporting your family. So our people moved from place to place to make sure that they could find work. And one of the ways they were able to connect with the Jewish community was by sharing this language, Yiddish.
So here's something I found that was very interesting. I from my Jewish learning, it's really a wonderful resource. I keep
Mhm.
drawing screenshots from my Jewish learning, but they have this article that talks about the origins of Yiddish, and they talk about in early Ashkenazi societies, which means Eastern European Jews, Hebrew was the language of the Bible and prayer, Aramaic
Mhm.
was the language of learning, and Yiddish was the language of everyday life.
Mhm.
Scholars refer to this as the internal trilingualism of Ashkenaz, which
Yeah.
it never occurred to me that you know the Europeans, the European Jews who lived, in Lithuania and Poland, they really had to learn about almost four different languages. Is that correct?
Yeah, there were multilingual people. Of course, many of the Jews in Eastern Europe were, I say middlemen, but there were middle women too. They reported to the ruling class. They were the people who oversaw the books, or if we want, we can talk about, they ran the inns. They were the innkeepers. They had to be communicating with multiple groups of people, and they had to be multilingual in those days. And Yiddish, though, was the connector of the Jewish people. It helped us communicate with each other and continued to well into the 20th century. In the early 1900s, when you have the Eastern European Jews coming en masse to the United States, they spoke Yiddish to each other, if they came from Poland or Russia or Lithuania, fill in the blank. Yiddish was spoken here by the immigrant population.
It reminds me of one of my favorite jokes, which is, what do you call someone who speaks more than four languages?
Multilingual.
Polyglot. What do you call someone who speaks three languages?
Trilingual.
That's right. What do you call someone who speaks two languages?
Duolingual.
Bilingual, yeah.
Bilingual.
And what do you call someone who speaks one language?
American.
American. That's it. You knew the joke. There we go.
I'm an American.
Yeah. Well, for us Americans, we certainly have this experience of hearing Yiddish kind of tossed around in different movies. If you watch the Borat films, Borat, who's played by Sacha Baron Cohen,
Yes.
very well widely known as a Jew, he throws in Yiddish into his fake Arabic language
Yes.
all the time to kind of throw some Jewish humor into his characters that he does, and it's really geniusly done. So that's how most Americans experience Yiddish, which is really fascinating. But what I'm realizing from what you're saying is that Yiddish is a diaspora language.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really interesting. I've never thought of it that way. And I think that really becomes very apparent back in that article in My Jewish Learning. They also had a section about what happens to Yiddish post-Holocaust. And so they talk about how the Holocaust destroyed most of the population in America after the war. Immigrant parents were often hesitant to speak Yiddish with their children because they thought it would single them out. So they actually went into the intense pressures of Americanization.
Yeah.
But the last half century brought many positive developments in Yiddish. It has been seriously studied as an academic discipline, and Yiddish literature has been recognized as great world literature, exemplified by Isaac Bashevis Singer, received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1978.
Yes, that was incredible. If I can add, so at the Workers' Circle, we teach Yiddish. We're a social justice organization, but we're rooted in our Yiddishkeit, and we are one of the largest Yiddish language programs in the world. We teach over 50 classes, 3 semesters a year. Right now we're in the summer semester, which is a 4-week program. But in the fall, winter, and then winter, spring, we have over 50 classes a semester, all online. People come to engage in Yiddish today because they want to reconnect to that language and that culture. A lot of people come to us who are in their 70s now, and they all say, I'm learning Yiddish. I kind of understand it because my parents used to speak it when they didn't want me to understand. And so, yes, Yiddish was both that secret language, and of course the kids learned a lot of it, but not all of it. And now they have this desire to reconnect with that language that was their heritage and was so much a part of their childhood. We can't overstate the shadow cast on our people by the Holocaust. The Jews were the victims of a genocide. 6 million were murdered. The chilling effect of having seen it from afar, how many people grew up without knowing somebody who survived or knowing of family who were murdered? We were singled out for a genocide, and the people who were subject to that genocide spoke Yiddish. Yiddish was part of the culture that was all but exterminated, but not exterminated. We are still here.
We are still here.
And a key Yiddish word that we use at the Workers' Circle to inspire us is mir seinen do. We are here. And it's words from the partisan hymn. It was written by a man of blessed memory named Hirsch Glick. He was a poet. He was in the Vilna ghetto in Vilna ghetto. And word came to them of the great Warsaw Ghetto uprising. And he wrote an anthem with the words, "We are here." And it speaks to who we are. And at the Workers' Circle, we wear it emblazoned on our backs, on our shirts. We use it all the time. It spoke to this sense of these people imprisoned in a ghetto for the crime of being Jewish, of being who they are, saying, "We are here." They knew that most of them would not survive. Hirsch Glick, unfortunately, was murdered, and they were here fighting for a better world and looking forward to people like us who would be here remembering them and putting our culture forward today proudly. So mir seinen do is words of inspiration.
It really is inspiring. And as you were describing that, I really did get chills. Any kind of empowerment during such difficult times as the Holocaust is absolutely wild. So thank you for sharing that. I have a question, though. So Yiddish did take on kind of a reignition. It kind of got reborn after the Holocaust eventually.
Yes.
But I'm sure Israel had a part of that as well. One thing I'm curious about is that because in Eastern Europe, Yiddish became the everyday language. Why didn't Yiddish become the everyday language in Israel?
Well, that's a great question. And it was one that was debated by the founders of Israel. There were very strong arguments that Yiddish should be the language of Israel when it was founded. The decision was made to make Hebrew that language. And actually I understand a lot of Orthodox members were very strongly objecting to Hebrew being the language of Israel because, as they said at the time, I mean, this is the language of the Bible, of the Torah. We don't want swear words in Hebrew. We don't want disrespect in Hebrew. Yiddish was the language of the people. I can't speak to all the specifics, but I believe there was a sense of starting anew. And there was a difficulty then in how to start anew after experiencing such an incredible tragedy. And some of the decision was based on wanting a fresh start, a new language, a new people, a strong people. And you can go from there. So Yiddish was not chosen as the voice of the people. And as you see, when you go to Israel today, there are swear words and risque films in Hebrew. And there's a lot of religious people who find this incredibly objectionable. And they themselves continue to adopt Yiddish as their primary language. And we lost a part of our heritage by not adopting Yiddish as our language. I mean, we looked forward, but I think as a people, and I'll include the Jews of the United States, in so many ways, we stopped looking at our Eastern European past. And that's something I'm committed to with the Workers' Circle, is reconnecting with that 1,000 years of life, because that's our identity too. And I want to acknowledge there's hundreds of thousands of Jews who don't trace their ancestry to Eastern Europe. We are a diasporic world, and we come from all over the world. And in no way am I suggesting Ashkenazic Jews are the only direction for our history, but that history is so important. And only looking, as I did growing up in what I call the shadow of the Holocaust, to Eastern Europe as a place where we died versus a place where we lived, I think cut off a very important part of who we are. And readopting Yiddish, reconnecting with that heritage, is filling our Jewish identity, making it whole and meaningful and inspiring.
And one thing I'm picking up on from what you were describing is, Yiddish is a very Ashkenazi language.
Yes.
As we've pointed out, very point blank, like it came from these different origins in German and Hebrew and Russian and even some French in there. There's a whole blend of languages inside Yiddish. It's
Right.
kind of this amalgamation, if you will. The one thing I'm picking up on is that Yiddish is very much a European language. It's an amalgamation of Hebrew and there's Russian and Polish and German, even a little French in there. It's really just, let's take a bunch of languages, throw it in a blender, and hope it works, which it did work. It worked for a
Yes.
long, long time.
Yes.
So what I find really fascinating is that, that also, I wonder if there was ever a disconnect when an Ashkenazi Jew met a Sephardic Jew or a Mizrahi Jew back in the day. Now, Sephardic, of course, means Spain and Northern Africa, and Mizrahi means African.
Yeah.
So we're looking at other diasporic cultures now blending in with that. I guess that's another reason why Yiddish didn't become the language of the Jewish people in Israel as well, because they could all in the same way that Yiddish allowed for the crossroads of different cultures to blend in Europe. Now, with only the Jews, Hebrew was the only language that helped them relate to each other. So at that point, language is incredibly important.
Yes.
Now, let me ask you this. I want to shift gears for a second. I'm a classic American Jew. I'm just creating a hypothetical here, right? And I want to learn Yiddish. What is the best way to start learning Yiddish, to speaking it fluently?
Well, I mean, as the CEO of the Workers' Circle, I would say one option, and there are others, is to just come to the Workers' Circle, come to the circle.org and sign up for a Yiddish class. We make it really easy. All of our classes are virtual. We've been teaching online since 2014, and we teach about over 1,000 people at any given time. So come on and sign up for Yiddish 101. That's the easiest way. We even have short classes. If you don't read Hebrew script, we have short classes to teach you, because the letters are the same for Hebrew and Yiddish. So, come and just explore once a week for 8 to 10 weeks and learn some basics. There's other things you can do. You can dabble in Duolingo. That's an app. If you just want to try a little bit of Yiddish, go to Duolingo and sign up. It's a lot of people start that way, and then they come and they want to take a formal program. Or check out on circle.org our events. We have dozens over the year of free events, and a good portion of them are celebrating Yiddish culture. I mean, we really love it. I just did a program with the Museum of Jewish Heritage on kosher pickles and the heritage, because that's something that was huge in Eastern Europe, but for a lot of reasons, including nutritional reasons. They have a live bacteria akin to what's in yogurt. So our ancestors ate them to stay healthy and to preserve vegetables. And I did a whole program on that. I've done programs on Jews and liquor, which I don't know if you know this, but 85% of the Jewish population in the Kingdom of Poland, so that's Russia, Poland, in the 1700s, if they lived in the countryside, were involved in the liquor industry. We were a major part of the liquor industry. And we were the people who ran inns, which were also where they brewed or distilled liquor, spirits. So we talk about that. That's a part of who we are. That's that 1,000 years of life. We have some fun, and we also are very serious. We talk about political movements, and we certainly talk about the Holocaust and how we survived and how we and where we didn't. Very sadly. So the organization is all about the life, putting people in front of us, remembering those lives, and come to us, dip your toe. And we're not the only organization who does that. There's others out there. But I think we're a nice way to start reconnecting with Yiddishkeit. And you don't have to be Jewish to do it. We have non-Jews who come to us. We have people who are Sephardic. And we even have taught some classes that make those connections to the Sephardim and Mizrahim. We are very, we know that we're not the only way to be Jewish, and we really like to introduce people to the different traditions.
Love that. Love that. Now, I have a really dumb question that I probably should have asked at the very, very beginning, but I have to ask it, and I've always been too embarrassed to ask it in public spaces.
Can't wait.
This is why I have this podcast. Yiddishkeit. What does that word mean?
So that is great, because we've had our own internal conversations about it. To me, Yiddishkeit, and when I use it, it means the whole Yiddish culture, heritage, tradition. It means it all. It's talking about this, it's not enough to say Yiddish language. Yiddishkeit it puts it all together. In other contexts, some people use Yiddishkeit to talk about religious, which is not what I'm talking about. And when you talk to people like the Workers' Circle and others, we're talking about a secular Yiddish movement. And that's where we're focusing is on the way people lived, on what made our people tick in Eastern Europe. So when we talk about Yiddishkeit, we like to talk about everything, their values, their traditions, their heritage.
Fascinating. And is there a different definition today outside of the organization?
Well, I ask a lot of people, what do you think when you think of Yiddishkeit? And that tends to be it. But there is, I think, amongst the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredim, they may use Yiddishkeit more as to talk about their own observance. And of course, they are Yiddish speakers as a group. So, but outside of that, I think most of us are using Yiddishkeit, as I am, to talk about the people.
Fascinating, fascinating. And for those who do want to start learning Yiddish, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see this, but I'm pulling up a little image here of some very basic Yiddish words to start with. We have words like putz, when you're being a putz, schluck. I actually don't know that one. Or schlock. What's a schlock?
Schlock. It's schlock is I think it's without value. Schlock. It's schlock.
Oh, okay. It's cheap.
These are a lot of bad words.
There are a few bad words here. Yeah.
I mean, just word latkes, of course, is a good word.
I just noticed the word Shrek. I know that Shrek, the movie, is a metaphor for anti-Semitism. Is that where the word Shrek comes from? I think it does come from Yiddish, and I don't believe Shrek means anti-Semitism, but I'd have to zero in. I see tchotchke. I see a lot. There's a lot of, but Shrek sounds also like something with a questionable value. But we better look at that before we. Oh yeah. So I just noticed this. This was totally accidental. But Shrek, the romanization of the Yiddish word, related to the German Schreck, meaning fear or fright.
Fear. Oh, that's perfect. That's
Yeah.
perfect.
So I did. So this is a side note. I did know that the movie Shrek was actually
Yes.
made as a way to describe what anti-Semitism is like. So
I didn't realize that. But
so all those
brilliant.
nice European fairy tales that are in there, that's all symbolically chosen for a reason. So there's a reason why
Wow.
European fairy tales are chosen as opposed to other ethnicities and their fairy tales as well. I thought that was really interesting. Start with those Yiddish words, especially the bad words, and then from there go to circle.org. Be sure to get involved with the organization, follow their programming, get in contact with Anne at info@circle.org to start learning your Yiddish and to start your Yiddishkeit journey today. So
and have some fun doing it.
And have some fun.
That's the key piece is we lived, we laughed, we celebrated, we mourned, we resisted, and we were resilient, all in Yiddish. And it's a way to inspire all of those experiences and traditions today.
Don't be a putz. Sign up today. That's all I got to say. And it was really a pleasure having you here on Bad Jew. By the way, do you know how to say Bad Jew in Yiddish? Just out of curiosity.
I don't.
It's something Yiddish. I don't know. Anyway,
we can look it up after. I mean, I'd hate to. I was saying to you before we started, there's no bad Jews.
There's no bad Jews.
We're good people, and we strive to do better.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. Thank you again so much for being on Bad Jew, the place where there is no such thing as a bad Jew. For those who are listening, this question, does Yiddish even matter in modern day society, was asked in our Bad Jew WhatsApp community. If you're interested, be sure to email me, badjewpod@gmail.com, or go to our Linktree intake form, fill out your information, and we'll add you promptly to that WhatsApp community right away. So with that, thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Sei gesund. Be well.
Shalom.